What did you say again? The prices? I can't hear you too well. Okay, thank you. All right, bye-bye. Tell them to call me when they get behind the door because there's no bell. Okay, have a good day. I'm out. Fucking that you learned from the Neapolitans.
Yeah.
My aunt, she was Napolitan, one of my aunts through marriage. She had a minor bird. I forget his name. And she had a little chihuahua named Chichi. So the minor bird was given to her by some American, probably Irish, because the bird used to sing, "Oh, Daddy Boy," and he'd sing an Irish song. But she had him in a big cage by her telephone. The telephone was on the wall, in the old days. And of course, she spoke with a heavy accent. And the bird would go, "Felicia, Felicia," and imitate the tone, "Chichi, and then he would sing Neapolitan, and then he would say, "Fatingu." So you go, "Fuck yourself." I go to, "What did you say?" He put his beat down. You walked away, "Fatingu." He was a fucking smart minor bird. Amazing, amazing. Anyway, all right, in the interim, what are we doing? Anybody want any more vermouth? I get the bottle out. We finished.
Well, if we need to fill our glasses up, for sure.
Okay.
Well, so tell me about, you said you're a third generation Italian American. Tell me a little bit about your family history and how they came to New York and what growing up in the Italian community was like in this area.
Okay. Well, my great-grandparents on both sides, of course, immigrated from Sicily and Calabria. I only was fortunate enough to know one great-grandmother, which was my father's mother's mother. She was from Catania. We called her Nana, of course. Growing up, I was born on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, on Monroe Street, in Rockton, Little Italy, but Lower East Side. And we all lived in one building. My great-grandmother was a big tenement building. My great-grandmother lived across the hall. We lived in the back. My godmother, Philly, lived upstairs. My cousin, Sue, a bunch of us, and all my great-aunt lived down the block. We all grew up, the Italians stuck in the same community in them days. So I lived there till I was 4.5 or 5. Then those buildings were going to be condemned and knocked down, and they had just built the Alfred E. Smith projects on Madison Street, yet in Lower Manhattan, and we moved in there. And then my grandfather, my mother's father, got very sick, and they called her because they were estranged for a while, and she got the call. They went to see him. Next thing you know, they're moving in the building where my grandfather lived. A lady that lived in the building passed away, Mrs. LaRocca. So we moved to Myrtle Avenue in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, Myrtle and Lewis. By that time I was 5 or 6, I think it was 6, because I started kindergarten in Brooklyn. And all my life, and my father's mother, although she was born here, and my father's parents were American, first generation born here, were very Italian. I mean, my grandmother always had Italian records on, music and dancing. She was Calabrese. Her mother was from Catania. Her father was from Corigliano, Calabro, Provincia Cosenza. And she was very Calabrese. My grandmother would never tell you she's Sicilian. My grandfather was very Sicilian. He was from Palermitano, his family. And she spoke his language, but like when people would meet her, they say, "Oh, Madeline, you're from Palermo?" "No, I'm not Palermitano, I'm Calabrese." But she could speak my grandfather's dialect as well as her mother's Catanese, but she mostly spoke Calabrese. So I learned. Now my father and my aunts and uncles, none of them could speak Calabrese. They only spoke like their father's family, Palermitane, Gaccade Palermitane. But I learned all the dialects. And from young, I loved Italian music. I had my record player. I would listen with my little ear next to the Victrola. We used to call it Victrola in my days. With the little needle, you had to change the needle and put it in and listen to the music. So from very young, and I had a lot of Italian people all around me, and I was always interested and listened to them speak this, that, and the other. So as I grew up, and we used to go to Coney Island. There was a ritual, a tradition that went on for years. Italian Americans used to go to Coney Island in the summer, and there was this one bay called Bay 13. Some reason all the Italians congregated under that big sign, Bay 13. They said, I don't know if it still exists, but they have these bays, these big wooden signs with the numbers. And all these Italians would sit there, older men and women, and they would bring their instruments, tambourines, castanets, organetto, and sing in there. They would eat their lunch at 12 o'clock, drink their homemade wine in bottles, and start singing and dancing on the beach. And then once a year, they used to have a feast of Our Lady of the Assumption, August 15th, and they would dress up like a mock wedding as the bride. Priests would come on a boat, bless the waters, and everybody would go to the waters, and then they would celebrate this big feast on the beach. So I grew up seeing this as a kid. hanging out. So at the time I was 13, there was this old man, Louis, from Calabria, and he played the organetto. And I used to be fascinated. By that point, I could play tambourine, castanets, even Spanish gypsy style. Not like the Napolitano, clack, clack, clack. I play castanets like the gypsies, Anyway, so I saw this organetto, and I knew in my heart I could play it. So one day I said to my mother, I want you to buy me an organetto. She said, what are you, crazy? Well, there's other stories about the crystal ball that moves. So I said, I'm telling you, Ma, I can play. So I begged her and cajoled and cried and, whatever. So finally they gave in them days a Horner, the German style accordion, was the two spoons. I don't know if you ever saw them. They had like spoons instead of the bass. One row. It was like $50 in them days. That was a lot of money. And there used to be this record store. Mo, this Jewish guy, owned this record store on Graham Avenue. And so she bought it for me. I took it out of the box, and I started eking out a song. And the first song I played was one of my favorites, which is like the Calabrese national anthem, Calabresella. My mother was like, huh? I said, I told you I could play it. Anyway, from there on, it was history. And I used to go to the beach every day in the summer after school, bring my organetto on the beach, play it, sing with the ladies, learn all the different old traditional songs, whether they're Neapolitan, Calabrese, Pugliese, Sicilian. And my education I got from all these elder people. I was a teenager, but I was the little baby. They all mothered me and daddied me, took care of me. Aspetta. Hold on, potential scam. It might be. Hold on 1 minute, I can't hear you. Hold on, hello? 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 I don't hear you. Okay, call back. See, I tell you, this is crazy. Now it doesn't want to hang up. Anyway, so that's where I really started, and then we used to have these pilgrimages to all these different Italian sites of the saints, Madonna Montevergine, Lady of Mount Carmel, whatever. Anyway, and this old lady, Ida, we used to call her Ida, Napolitana, she used to organize these bus rides. And all Italian people, mostly older men and women, some young kids, they bring their kids or grandkids. And I always was, asked to help her. And I would get a free ride on the bus, but I had to play the organetto and entertain the ladies and sing and dance in the bus. Then we would get to the pilgrimages. There used to be a place in New Jersey, St. Michael's Grove in Totowa, New Jersey, St. Michael's Hill. They used to have the Feast of St. Michael, the Archangel in September. A little boy would fly across cables dressed as the Archangel Michael, and thousands of people's bus rides would come from all over the tri-state area, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Boston, even, and they would have picnic tables, and they would have music, and constantly singing and dancing all day long, and food. They would sell food. We would bring lunch, our own food from home. Italian mothers made all their dishes, and all day long singing and dancing. Sometimes my parents would come with me, and I was very thin when I was young. See that picture up there when I was ordained minister? Anyway, I was very thin. So, and I'd be dancing from the 7 o'clock in the morning until they would pull me to get in the bus at 7:30 at night. My mother, you're going to get a heart attack. I said, I'm not going to get a heart attack. And I would smoke and dance all day long. You couldn't get me to go home. And so that's some of the stuff. What else do you want to know? What else?
So were there other men who played organetto?
Oh, sure. Several. Not in my family, no. But of the people that I frequented, the people that I hung out with, all the old Italian men, Abruzzese, Calabrese, some even Napolitanos. Some of them played the larger button accordions, Montemaranese, Tarantella, Montemaranese, you know what I'm talking about, right? And, and some Pugliese. But most of the organetto, they would call it a dubotte, or l'organetto abruzzese, the Calabrese, and the Abruzzese. A lot of Abruzzese, and they would have the Zambogna. We used to have this guy, forget his name now. We did a lot of shows with him. Alessandro, I can't remember his name now. He lived in Jersey. We used to go to a lot of his, I can't think of his name, but he was a Zambognare. He was a Zambogna player. Abruzzese, I can't think of his name right now.
Michele?
Many years ago. Huh?
Was it Michele Fiore or something?
Maybe. It sounds familiar. He's a heavy set guy, Abruzzese, yeah. I can't remember his name now. But anyway, and then, fast forward, I've done this for years and years and years. Private parties, family parties, the beach, Italian festivals. Italian used to be a famous Neapolitan radio announcer and MC, Nino Dauria. Nino Dauria used to have the Napolitan, the showboat. There would be a showboat every year. Every year they'd have a showboat, and it would be full of Italian people, Italian American. I just hoping it. Hello? 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 Yes? Honey, I'm in an interview right now. Hello? Hello, I can't. Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? How rude. I don't know who she's from and where she's from, and I don't know what she's talking about. So anyway, there used to be this thing every summer. They would have this thing called Napolicanda. He was on the radio. He had his own program. He was well known, Nino Lauria. Actually, he was of Sicilian extract, but born in his mother was Neapolitan. His father was from Palermo, but he was born in Naples, so he loved Naples, so he considered himself Neapolitan. He spoke Neapolitan. And he had this show on TV, and he would host the Italian Feast San Gennaro. He was like the top MC. And then he would have this showboat. You know, you would get tickets, and on the boat you could bring your own food and buy food. And they had 3 platforms, bands, American band, Italian band, and folk music. And then they would get off either at Bear Mountain or Rye Beach and have a picnic, go back on the boat. And it was all singing and dancing all day long on the Italian showboat. And of course I would get on stage and perform and sing and play the accordion. So we did that for many years. And then I through my job in your neighborhood, there was this guy, Greg Domani. I don't know if you know who Greg Domani is. Anyway, he lived around there. I forget what street it was now, on Humboldt Street, one of those streets. And I met him through my work, because I was a community organizer and did surveying of the neighborhood, of all that neighborhood in Greenpoint, Williamsburg. So Greg and this guy, Dino, I can't think of his last name at the moment, Dino, they used to perform together. Greg was Italian American, Dino came from Italy. And they met me, I forget who introduced us. And through them, I met Alessandro Belloni. That was in the 80s. They referred me to Han. That's how I joined the group with them. But Greg and I and Dino were forming a trio, a group. We were performing Southern Italian music locally in the neighborhood and little gigs like that.
What kind of music were you playing?
What kind of music?
Yeah.
Southern Italian folk music.
Like
tarantella. Mostly tarantella, but I sing stornelli, what they call budette, which I'll do one for you and make you see how we sing Calabrese. Like a stornelli, we call a budette, you know. And, and folk songs, different folk songs from different regions, like Sicilian Cudino Lisse, or Shuri Shuri, or Vitina Grozza. Just different, Southern Italian folk songs. Calabrese, like Tata Camoro, 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 Pinagulio, Cavoto, just that. Anyway, all those different, But yeah, we sang, basically we played tarantella, maybe a mazurka, but singing, that kind of music. Tamuriada, not too much. We did that more with the group with Alessandro Tamuriada, because there was a few Neapolitans, like, what was his name, Giuseppe De Falco, and Nando that came from Italy, our friend from Italy. Let me get that bottle of, finish that cheap masala. That's all I got in the house. I mean, I got rum. You like spiced rum? You want a stiff drink?
No, I'm okay. Let's...
Too early. Yeah.
Okay. Help yourselves.
Do you make this?
No. You buy that opici. You buy that. It's not even the good. There's a good real Sicilian masala. It's strong. I can't get it anymore. I used to get it, and now that's the only one I could find. Pass the bottle. It's like spin the bottle, pass the bottle. You don't want?
I still got some.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Anyway, so that's what we did. We did a lot of, and you got to realize, I don't know if Greg was second or third like me, but, the other guy was from Italy. I think he came from, I don't know if he came from Abruzzo or he came from Puglia. Anyway, Dino, but he was very American. I can't think of Dino's last name. It'll come to me. But so many different people that I played with and through the years, And then in between that, I mean, how I got involved with the Latino community from very young and got into spiritualism at the age of 9 and started doing readings at the age of 9. I've had psychic visions since I was a child. I told my mother things and she wouldn't believe me, but so they would come through and I would see people before they came, live people, not the dead ones that I see. My back is the cemetery. They come walking through here all the time. That's another story. But anyway, and by the time I was 21, I was an ordained spiritualist minister with the oldest spiritualist organization in New York, General Assembly of Spiritualists. And by the time I was in my 30s, I got ordained in the Afro-Caribbean tradition, Santeria, which I'm a priest of Obatala. That's why I wear all white, which is a Orisha of purity and old age and father. It's like almost like in the African tradition, well, he's wisdom, he's purity, he's father image, he's the archetype of father, creative energy, intelligence, mental, agility, whatever. They're supposed to be very gifted, his children. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway.
I've just been reading, I don't know if you've read Ernesto de Martino's writings about Southern Italian folk magic or about...
I have hundreds and hundreds
Okay.
of books of Italian folk magic.
Well, I'm just curious. I have that book too.
Yeah,
It's a
there's
good
another
book,
one,
yes.
Evil Eye. I have thousands of books.
Well, tell me about, when you were younger in the Italian American community, what kind of different types of folk magic were you seeing back then?
Okay, well, we would go into houses. My mother's stepmother was a witch. My mother's stepmother's family came from this town in Sicily, which is known like Salem of America, Santa Margherita Bellici. They say, Margherita o margheritare sono a fattorie in case che fa maiaria, which means people from Santa Margherita, if they're not out in the farm and countryside, they're in the house doing magic. So it's known in the town that they're very heavily into magic or devil worship, but not really the devil. They would say, they have an expression, Santo Diavolo, they call the devil holy, Santo Diavolo. But they do believe in fairy folk, they believe in very old, cultures, things like that. So we'd walk into my mother's stepmother's house or her mother, my mother's grandmother, step-grandmother, and they all had either red ribbons hanging, like the horn, the red ribbon, the horseshoe, little things. But I knew instinctively as a child that they were witches. I had this vision when I was a kid. I didn't know what astral projection was, but I rolled out of my body into a hole in the wall, and I saw all these ladies dressed in black, gray hair, glasses, buns, And I knew they were witches instinctively. Mind you, 5 years old. I woke up, I told my mother the dream. What happened, like I said, in between, my mother was estranged from her father. When she married my father, it was a big to-do, stubborn old Sicilian. Then my grandfather got sick. They called my mother. Of course, my mother ran. She loved her father. And next thing I know, these people that I saw in the dream start coming to my house. My mother's stepmother, my mother's step-grandmother, my mother's step-aunt Josie. Always wore black, gray hair, the buns, the typical old Sicilians. And I knew from the childhood that they were witches. Don't know how I know, but I know. Prior to that, my first vision, you want to hear? I must have been 4.5 years old. So my father worked nights. We lived in Manhattan, and he worked here in Queens and Mass with the Long Island Railroad. And he used to have to commute. He didn't have a car. He did the 3 to 11 shift. By the time he got home, it was 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So my mother would keep some food warming at the stove, and she would read in bed, and I would be laying next to her. My sister was older. She had her own room. We're almost 5 years older. So I would lay in bed. So at one point, my mother says, you're a big boy. Go in your own bed. You have your own bed. All right. I went in my room, my own bed, and I had this vision, which I tell you, I didn't know who the Sacred Heart of Jesus was, but I saw this vision, of which now I know is the Sacred Heart of Jesus, glowing in the heart. And mentally, I could even say, don't be afraid, little boy. I'll always be with you. Got out of my bed. I went to my mother's master bedroom and said, Ma, God is in my room. My mother didn't believe me. All right, be a good little boy, go back to bed. Went back into bed, and there was the vision, shimmering lights from the heart, beautiful rays of gold and red and hues of gold, yellow. And I felt this warmness come over me, and I fell asleep. And then this is not a dream, because now I'm 77, I can remember it and vivid as it was yesterday. And from then on, and then another time, we lived on the 11th floor in the Alfred E. Smith projects. I'd be playing on the floor. I had my own bedroom. My sister had her bedroom. We had 3 bedrooms. My mother had a master bedroom. My dad I was playing on the floor with my cowboys and Indian plastic. Them days we had plastic horses and cowboys, and we played. And all of a sudden, I was transported somewhere. I was outside, sitting on the ground, packed, terra firma, and I was sitting in a circle of all Indian shamans. And I was 5. And I was smart enough to say, I'm not going to tell my mother. Nobody's going to believe me. That was over. We moved to Brooklyn, like I said. Then I had a neighbor who came from Puerto Rico. She was the janitor, the new janitor, Lydia. And she says, you want to come with me to the church around the corner? So we had a store. My mother had an Italian deli restaurant. And she was always busy. My father, I don't know what he was doing about it. He was working. I said, Ma, could I go with Lydia to the church, her church? Yeah, go ahead. My mother was an easygoing Aquarian. Go ahead, go do whatever you got to do. So I go next door to the church with Lydia, but it was a centro. They call it Centro Espiritista, a spiritualist center. Them days they used to call it center or a church. I get in there, and there's a table, and there's mediums sitting at the table, and the candle is dark, and whatever they used, a fishbowl of water for like clairvoyance, whatever. So the woman, I'll never forget, her name was Irma. She was a beautician, but she was the head medium. She had 2-color hair, blonde and brown. Short, fat, pretty woman, chubby, very light-skinned Puerto Rican lady. She called me up to the table. Now, I didn't speak fluently Spanish back then, as I can today, at 9 years old. But she called me up to the table. First, she asked the lady, who's this boy? She said, oh, that's my neighbor's son. Okay, she said, come here. So I stand at the head of the table. She starts talking to me in Spanish. While she's talking to me in Spanish, I see a spirit guide of my Indian spirit, Native American. Everything she's telling me in Spanish, and mentally he's translating to me in English, and I could understand. You're going to come to do this work one day. You're going to be big in this religion. And that was that. So now I used to go a couple of times, and I got into it. I really felt really comfortable. Then one time my mother had to pull me out because we had to go to my aunt's house. It was the summer, and they pulled me out before the session closed. And I had this horrible headache. It wouldn't go away. And we used this stuff in Spanish and Caribbean tradition. It's an alcohol perfume, Florida water, agua florida. And I had that and was smelling it because my spirit, like certain spirits, like certain scents. So I rubbed that on, and the headache eventually went away. And from then on, I was always attracted to, now this is before I knew we had Gypsy ancestry. I was always attracted to gypsies. Wherever I saw them, like I wanted to go and be with them. I had a boxer. My first dog was that was my last dog, my English bull, but he reminded me of my first boxer champ. I was about 9 years old. So I was walking my dog one day down the street, and there was this store. Gypsy had a fortune-telling store, what they call Office in Gypsy. And her son, Stevie, was a little blonde kid. He was a light gypsy boy. And he said, could I pet your dog? I said, sure. And, we have kids on, you get friendly. So I got friendly with Stevie and his mother. And it's like I felt this love for this lady that I'd never, I really didn't know her. And I would hug her and kiss her. She enjoyed that. I was a lovable child. And years passed, then one day my grandfather finally told a story about how one of his great-grandfather, somebody ran away with a gypsy, or I don't know if they raped a gypsy. They had a connection with gypsy blood. But from then on, and I always had the gift of second sight, reading. I could read cards from the age, and I made my career. Starting at 13, I had a following. So this day, I made all my money in doing tarot readings, as well as music, as well as I've had regular office job. I worked, and I then had my own church for 50 years in Manhattan. First, I started at an Insonia Hotel. My teacher pushed me out. That's where all the spirituals used to be. Big spiritualist churches in the Insonia Hotel. From there, I opened up my own place. Well, I sublet. I never owned it. I sublet the space in Carnegie Hall office buildings. When the lady died there, we couldn't afford the rent anymore. Then I rented New York spaces on 8th Avenue, and I had that church for 25 years. Still in my late 50s, I was starting having pains and trouble with my legs. I couldn't go up and down the stairs. Then my dad was getting old and sick. My mom already passed. I took care of her, and I took care of my dad. And to date, this is what I do. I do my readings. I play my music. I have God, and then in the religion, in the Santeria community, we have godchildren, which we have responsible for their spiritual well-being, their health, and so we do things to help them and counsel them and do rituals, and that's my life.
In the Italian community, were there people back in the day who practiced tarantismo, or like Saint Vitus dancing or anything like that?
I've heard of it, but not to my knowledge.
Okay.
I never met anyone. No. I know we heard about it. Again, mostly among the people from Puglia, some people from like Avellino, Napoli, and in Calabria. I didn't hear them talk about Tarantismo too much. Magic, yeah, or like we'll say, like whatever happened last night, or if you bang your head, somebody say, "Compa, m'hanno fatta da fascina, m'hanno affascinata." They fascinate, which in other words saying like they bewitch me. Or we'll say in Calabria, "Upiccio, t'hanno fatto upiccio." Sicilians will say "upicchio." Upicchio means again the evil eye. You got eyed. You got taken by the evil eye. Upicchio, the Sicilians say. Calabrese say "upiccio." M'hanno fatto upiccio. Or they'll say "m'hanno affascinata." My grandmother would always tell stories. Her aunts would say "m'hanno affascinata, m'hanno affascinata," meaning like they fascinated me, they bewitched me, they gave me the evil eye.
Who did you learn to cure the evil eye from?
Where did I learn to cure the evil eye from? Oh my God, one old Sicilian lady, another Napolitana lady. My great-great-mother wouldn't teach me, but I watched her. I don't know the prayer she used, but I saw this. But I saw several ceremonies. Who did it with the scissor? There was this one Napolitana lady from Avellino, Rosina Pecorelli. She would do it with a knife. She would carry a special butter knife, but it was like consecrated. And with that knife, she would do her ritual. We use a scissor. Some people use the matches. In Calabria, they use 7 matches. Set the whole phosphor. They burn 7 matches. It all depends, you know.
Did they also use the oil and water, or is that a
yeah,
different,
no,
that's a
oil
different
and,
one?
I can do without oil and water, just with the prayer. But like when Alessandro called me, said, "Oh, Gypsy, I think I got the evil eye." So okay, let me go check. So I do the prayer, the bowl of water, dip the oil in. If it splits up, you know, if it stays firm, no. Anyway, I'll still, you know, cut the air with the scissors and stab the eye. And of course, Gypsy, everything is pui, pui, pui. You spit 3 times. We've done it through the years, like paisanos would get together and go to each other's houses, whether they live in New Jersey, Long Island. Like when my comadre Lisa moved to Jersey, she lives in Rockaway. All the paisanos from Belrose, Queens, whatever, we all went to the house and we went behind the door, we started singing. Oi, si dove dove date, la usavo the comadre Lisa, and she opened the door like, ah, and then we did the tarantella. And that was it. They opened the door after you did the tarantella. Everybody opens the door. They come out with the bottle of wine or the cheese. Because as you would ask them, don't cut the salami. Give me the whole salami. Non mi spiccato soppressate. Non mi dammi curtello. Dammi tutto. Give me the whole salami. You know, crazy stuff like that. And that's the strina. Let me see. Cudilo di sigla e all'assai, meglio la morte e sono stupori. Ai 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 ai, moro 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 moro, caduto non mi tori, l'amore mi senti. L'ubriba muri di dice cuttia e tu schifoso di sta sudando mia. Paci paci vuoi di garantia, si non la badia, la pure a Sicilian song. And then another famous Sicilian song is, you know this one. Iti la grozza su, tua curioseci a sospirare, ed a me rispondiu un gran dolore, moria senza sono di campane. And it goes on and on and on. There's like 3, 4. Okay.
You said that you used the organetto for an exorcism.
Well, you can.
What does that look like?
I'll say.
Or sound like?
I mean, you can do any tarantella to it, you know. You could do, you know, I mean, any tarantella could get to, you know, the pizzica. Actually, the pizzica is always used for that, you know, the faster version of the pizzica. Let's see if I remember what key. Okay. Something like that, fast pizzicas and all that helps to exercise the spirit, you know. And what else?
Did people dance to valsers and mazurkas?
Sure, I'll show you one. Very famous one between down from south of Naples to, you know, Calabria, Lugano. We do polkas, you know, there's one that we call Annabella Polka that I learned from my grandmother. Had a record when I was a kid. It's called Annabella Polka. It was Valtara Muzzetta. Actually, it was northern Italian music, but it was if I remember it. That's Arabella Polka. Ah, that's my niece. Oh, hola, 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 I'm coming.